Here's something that will never leave you once you know it. The next time someone smiles at you, really smiles wide and open, the kind of smile you see in a portrait or at a formal occasion, think about what's actually in their mouth. Not their own teeth, not ivory, not wood. That's the myth, the wooden teeth thing. Nobody used wooden teeth. Wood rots immediately. Wood swells with moisture. Wooden teeth would dissolve in your mouth within a week. No. What the wealthy Georgian actually had in their mouth, what was mounted on that carved hippopotamus ivory plate fitted carefully to their upper jaw, was a set of real human teeth, pulled from a real human mouth, on a real battlefield. Somewhere in Belgium, in June of 1815, approximately 50,000 men died or were wounded in a single day. 47,000 casualties in something like 8 hours of fighting, and before the last cannon had even stopped echoing across the fields of Waterloo, before the last wounded man had finished crying out, there were people moving through the dark with pliers. Dentists were paying very good money for fresh teeth that year. This is a story about mouths, about the space between what something looks like and where it actually comes from, about a trade that the fashionable streets of London preferred not to think about too carefully, while simultaneously depending on it completely. I make these history sleep stories, and I genuinely don't know if anyone sleeps to them, or if you're all just lying awake in the dark thinking about dead men's teeth now. Either way, get comfortable. This one takes you somewhere you haven't been before. Here we go. Your name is Thomas Holt. You're 17 years old, and you've been in London for 8 months, and your hands have never been clean since you arrived. Not dirty the way farm hands get dirty, that wholesome dark soil kind of grime that washes off after a moment in cold water. This is a different kind of dirty. This is the kind that gets into the cracks of your knuckles and the beds of your fingernails and stays there no matter how hard you scrub. Iron and salt and something faintly sweet that you've learned not to think about too carefully. The smell of blood doesn't bother you anymore. That happened around week 3. You work for Mr. Silas Kettrick, dental surgeon, premises on the east side of the Strand near Catherine Street, 2nd floor above a draper's shop. Brass plate on the door engraved with his name and credentials, and the silhouette of a molar. You've polished that plate 40 times this year. You know the exact weight of it in your hand. This morning the church bells are pulling you out of a sleep that wasn't deep enough. 5 o'clock, maybe 5:30. The October light is grey and thin through the single window of the room you rent from Mrs. Cadwallader 2 streets over. A room barely big enough to contain a bed and a washstand and the small trunk you brought from Shropshire with everything you owned back then. Back then. 8 months ago. It feels longer. The water in the basin is cold. Not fresh cold, not the pleasant shock of clean water on a hot face. Cold the way London water is cold in October, which is to say slightly greyish and faintly smelling of whatever pipe it came through, and the river it came from ultimately. The Thames. Everything in this city comes from the Thames eventually. Everything goes back to it too. You wash your face, pull on your shirt, your waistcoat, your coat that's starting to fray at the left cuff in a way you should have mended a month ago. Your shoes have a crack in the right sole that lets in water when the cobblestones are wet, which they almost always are. You haven't written to your mother in 3 weeks. You'll do it tonight. You've been saying that for 3 weeks. The stairs of Mrs. Cadwallader's creak on the 4th step and the 7th, and the landlady herself is somewhere below you in the kitchen, making something that smells like it might eventually become porridge. You slip past the kitchen door quietly, not because you're avoiding her, just because it's early, and you don't have time for the conversation she'll want to have about the couple in the room next to yours who came in at 2 a.m. making noise, she considers inappropriate for a respectable house. Outside, the Strand is already moving. London doesn't wake up. London merely shifts from one kind of motion to another. The night trade gives way to the morning trade without any real pause, just a gradual substitution of cart drivers and market porters for the gin shop regulars and the footpads who'd been working the same streets 3 hours earlier. The coal merchants are out, the milk sellers. A man with a handcart piled with cabbages that are only slightly past their best, calling out a price that suggests he knows exactly how past their best they are. Your breath comes out white in the morning air. The draper's shop below Mr. Kettrick's premises is still shuttered when you arrive, but the door to the staircase is on the latch, as it always is, and you let yourself in and climb the narrow stairs to the surgery. The surgery smells the way it always smells. And this is something you need to understand, something that took you weeks to get used to, and that visitors to the premises never quite managed to conceal their reaction to. It doesn't smell like you'd expect a place of healing to smell. It doesn't smell clean. It doesn't smell of herbs or clean linen or anything remotely medicinal. It smells of the work. Rosewater, yes. There's always rosewater somewhere. A small bowl of it near the window, which Mr. Kettrick says is for the comfort of patients. And laudanum, which has a sharp, sweet heaviness to it. And tooth powder made from pumice and chalk and something with a faint burnt quality. And underneath all of that, underneath all the attempts to smell like something other than what it is, the raw persistent smell of blood and saliva and the particular sweetness of rotten enamel, the smell of mouths, the smell of what's inside people's heads. You light the fire in the small grate first. The surgery needs to be warm before patients arrive. Cold makes everything worse. Cold tightens muscles. Cold makes patients tense. A tense patient is a difficult patient, and a difficult patient is, as Mr. Kettrick has explained to you more than once, a problem that costs more time than it saves. While the fire catches, you arrange the instruments. This is the part of the morning you've come to find almost peaceful. The instruments laid out in their proper order on the leather roll. The pelicans, the large extraction tools shaped like the beak they're named for, with their long arm and the claw at the end that hooks over the tooth. In 2 sizes, small and large. The elevators, the thin-bladed tools for loosening the tooth's roots before extraction. The scrapers and scalers, thin curved blades for cleaning tartar from teeth that are being kept. The drill, which is exactly what it sounds like, and which you try not to think about during the actual procedure, because the sound it makes goes directly through your back teeth and into the base of your skull. The forceps, 6 pairs, in different shapes for different teeth, each one cold and slightly heavy in your palm. You wrap your hand around the largest pair for a moment, the way you sometimes do, just feeling the weight of them. The way they work is simple and terrible. You grip the tooth, you rock it, you pull. The tooth's roots hold it in the jawbone, held by the periodontal ligament, and that ligament has to be broken. You rock the tooth side to side, loosening the grip, and then you pull, and there's always a moment, when you feel the root release. This wet yielding give that travels up through the forceps into your hand. You've done 43 extractions now, under Mr. Kettrick's supervision. You know exactly what that moment feels like. You lay the forceps down carefully, everything in its place. At the back of the surgery, behind a curtain, is the other room, the workroom, the laboratory, Mr. Kettrick calls it. with the mild self-importance of a man who considers himself a scientist. This is where the prosthetics live, where the carving happens, where the fitting happens, where the finished pieces wait in their padded boxes before collection. You're not supposed to go in there without permission. You go in there every morning when Mr. Kettrick hasn't arrived yet. The smell in the workroom is different again. Beeswax, warm and sweet, because wax impressions are taken from patients' mouths as the first step in making dentures. Bone dust, fine and pale from the carving of the bases. The sharp chemical smell of the spirit of turpentine that Mr. Kettrick uses to clean the pieces after carving. And on the central shelf, in their various stages of completion, the teeth, rows of them, sorted by size and shade into small wooden trays. Incisors here, canines there, the broad flat premolars in a separate section, each one slightly different from the next, different shades of white and yellow and grey, different sizes, slightly different shapes, not manufactured, not carved, real, human teeth, pulled from human mouths, sorted and shelved the way a silversmith might sort his findings, ready to be drilled and pegged into ivory bases and sent home in the mouths of people who paid good money to smile without embarrassment. You stand there in the cold workroom in the grey morning light and look at them. 43 extractions, and you've been in this city 8 months, and it's only been in the last few weeks that you've started really thinking about where these came from. Not the ones extracted in the surgery. Those you understand. Patients who come in with a tooth beyond saving, pay their shilling, endure the procedure, go home with a gap that might eventually be filled with one of these. There's a logic to that. A kind of recycling. Teeth go in, teeth come out, teeth get cleaned and sorted and eventually go back in somewhere else. But there aren't enough of those to explain the quantity on this shelf. There aren't nearly enough. Mr. Kettrick arrives at 7:30, which is early for him. Usually it's 8, sometimes closer to past. He's a compact man, 43 years old, with sandy hair going grey at the temples and very clean hands. The cleanest hands you've ever seen on a working man, scrubbed with a particular pumice soap he makes himself, because hands that go into mouths need to be clean, or as close to clean as London makes possible. He's dressed well, better than a mere tooth drawer would dress. The distinction matters enormously to him. He is not a tooth drawer. Tooth drawers work at fairs, at market squares, pulling teeth for a penny while a boy beats a drum to cover the screaming. Tooth drawers don't know anatomy. Tooth drawers are a step above the street. Mr. Kettrick is a dental surgeon. He studied in Paris. He has a certificate on his wall from a learned society with a very long name. He calls himself by the French term dentiste when talking to his better-class patients, and he says the word with a slight French inflection even though he's from Bristol. He looks at the instruments you've laid out, makes one small adjustment, moves the smaller pelican slightly to the left, and says nothing, which you've learned to interpret as approval. Mrs. Hartwell at 9, he says, hanging his coat. The second lower premolar. She's been putting it off for 6 weeks. Yes, sir. And Lord Fenthorpe's pieces should be ready for fitting this afternoon. Have you drilled the spare? The spare. The backup tooth, in case the primary doesn't look right in the fitting. Not yet, sir. Do it this morning, before Mrs. Hartwell. He goes to the workroom. You hear the familiar sounds of him opening boxes, checking work, the small precise movements of a craftsman examining his inventory. Then a pause. Thomas. You go to the doorway. He's standing at the central shelf and he's holding one of the teeth from the incisor tray between thumb and forefinger, turning it in the thin morning light coming through the high, narrow window. Do you know how old this is? You look at it. It's very white, almost too white. Most of the teeth on the shelf have that slightly off-white quality that natural teeth have, the ivory yellow of real enamel that's lived a life. This one is brighter, newer. Not long, you say. Months, maybe. He nods, sets it back in the tray with a care that seems excessive for a single tooth. Arrived yesterday with Marsh's lot, he says, from the new supply. Fresh. He says fresh the way a butcher might say it, the same tone of professional assessment. Good quality, the root's intact, you can tell by the weight. He picks it up again, hands it to you. You take it. It's lighter than you expect, or heavier. You're never sure which. It's always both at once. This strange weight of something that was recently part of a person. From Belgium, you ask? It's the first time you've said it directly. Asked directly. 8 months, 43 extractions. And this is the first time you've used the word that's been sitting in the back of your mind since somewhere around month 2, when you started doing the arithmetic. Mr. Kettrick looks at you. His expression is hard to read. Not uncomfortable, not offended, just carefully neutral in the way of a man who's had this conversation before and knows where it goes. Some of them, he says, some from other sources. You know how this works, Thomas. I know some of it. You know enough. He takes the tooth back. What you need to know is that this is the business. This has always been the business. Where do you think dentures came from before Waterloo? Before Belgium? He sets the tooth back in its tray. Surgeons' tables, he says. The bodies they were legally permitted to dissect. Workhouses, graves. Before that, the poor selling their own teeth for money they needed more than the tooth. It's always been something. Waterloo just made the supply... He pauses, choosing the word with the same care he uses on everything. More reliable. He goes back to the surgery. You stay in the workroom for a moment longer, looking at the trays. More reliable. You think about that while you take down the drill and find the piece for Lord Fenthorpe's upper plate, the spare incisor that needs a hole bored through its root for the peg that will mount it to the ivory base. The drill is a bow drill, small and precise, and you wrap the bowstring once around the shaft the way Mr. Kettrick taught you and begin to work, the tip biting into the enamel of the root with a fine grinding resistance that you feel in your wrist and forearm. The tooth is from someone whose name you will never know, who died at 20 years old maybe 25, on a muddy field in Belgium, on a hot June day last year, the day that ended Napoleon's empire and reportedly saved civilization, depending on which newspaper you read and which side you were on. And now you're drilling a hole through the root of it, so that Lord Fenthorpe can chew his dinner without his plate slipping. The fine white dust of the enamel accumulates on the leather roll under your hands. You keep drilling. Mrs. Hartwell arrives at 9 o'clock exactly, which tells you she's been outside waiting rather than risk being early, because arriving exactly on time requires the kind of calculation that only anxious people make. She's a woman in her middle 40s, dressed well but not extravagantly, with the careful presentation of someone who spends money on the things that matter to appearances and saves everywhere else. Her hat is very good. Her gloves are slightly worn on the left palm. She has a toothache that's been making her life miserable for 6 weeks. She's been managing it with oil of cloves. You can smell it faintly, warm and numbing, underneath the rosewater she's applied for the visit, and with laudanum drops at night, and with the desperate hope that it might somehow resolve on its own, which teeth never do. Teeth don't heal, they only get worse. You take her cloak and offer her the chair which is set near the window for the light. The chair is one of Mr. Kettrick's better investments. Not a dental chair exactly. Not the elaborate tilting mechanisms that the most fashionable London dentists have in their surgeries. The ones with the padded headrests and the adjustable arms. It's a sturdy armchair, the kind you might find in a modest drawing room, with the arms extended slightly wider than normal and the back set at an angle that positions the patient's head correctly for the work. It's comfortable enough to get into at least. Mrs. Hartwell sits. She's trying to look calm. She's not calm. Her hands are folded in her lap with the particular intentional stillness of a woman who's decided she won't show fear, which is its own kind of showing fear. Second lower premolar, Mr. Kettrick says, more to you than to her, pulling on his fine leather gloves. Open, please, Mrs. Hartwell. She opens her mouth. You've learned to look at mouths the way Mr. Kettrick does, with the professional detachment of someone cataloguing rather than witnessing. You hold the probe light, a small mirror on a handle, to direct the thin October sunlight from the window toward the problem tooth. You can see it immediately. The grey-black line where the decay has gone through the enamel. The slight swelling of the gum at the root. The tooth itself listing very slightly outward, loose in its socket from the infection underneath, which means extraction will be easier than it might have been, the ligament already partly compromised. Yes, Mr. Kettrick says quietly, mostly to himself. Yes, it's well past saving. Mrs. Hartwell makes a small sound. This will be better when it's out, he says to her, in his surgeon's voice, not his businessman's voice. The two are very different. The pain you've been experiencing comes from the infection at the root. Once the tooth is gone, the infection will drain and resolve. You'll feel the relief within a day. She nods. She knows. She's known for 6 weeks, which is why she's been putting it off for 6 weeks, and why the oil of cloves and the laudanum, and why the particular expression on her face right now. The laudanum first. A small dose, not enough to cloud the mind, just enough to take the edge off the pain response. Mr. Kettrick administers it himself, measuring drops into a small cup with the focused attention of a man who knows the exact difference between therapeutic and toxic. 10 minutes. You make tea, which you bring to Mrs. Hartwell, and she holds the cup in both hands and doesn't drink it much but seems to find the warmth of it comforting. The fire has the room properly warm now. Outside, the Strand noise continues. Wheels on cobblestones. Voices, the occasional bell of a church marking the quarter hour. Ready? Mr. Kettrick asks. No, she says, but go ahead. He positions himself beside and slightly behind her chair. You stand to the other side, close enough to assist if needed, to hold the probe light, to hand him what he asks for. He takes the elevator first, not the forceps yet, the elevator, and works it gently into the space between the tooth and the gum on the forward side, rocking slightly, beginning to work the ligament loose. Mrs. Hartwell's hands tighten on the arms of the chair. You watch her knuckles go white. Breathe, you say quietly. Mr. Kettrick doesn't tell patients to breathe. He considers it outside the clinical scope. But you've found that saying it helps, and he's never told you to stop. She breathes, then the forceps, the right pair, the lower premolar pair, with the curved beaks designed to grip that specific tooth in that specific position. Mr. Kettrick's grip is practiced and sure, not brutal, not the brute force pulling of the street tooth drawer who just yanks and hopes, but controlled. He rocks the tooth, forward and back, feeling the ligament release millimetre by millimetre. The sound is small and wet. Mrs. Hartwell makes no sound at all. A single tear runs from her left eye down to her jaw, and she doesn't move to wipe it, just sits completely still, hands white on the arms of the chair, eyes focused on something far away and internal, the moment of release. You feel it even from where you're standing, that faint shift in the tension of the room as the root comes free, and Mr. Kettrick steps back with the tooth in the forceps, and there's blood. There's always blood, filling the socket, and Mrs. Hartwell makes the first sound she's made through the whole procedure. A single breath out, long and shaking, not quite a sob but its cousin. "Done," Mr. Kettrick says. "Hold this." He passes you a roll of cotton for the socket. Press firmly for 5 minutes. He takes the tooth to the window. This is the moment you've started watching. This moment right here. He holds the extracted tooth up to the light, examines it. Root intact, which is what he's checking for first. Decay on the crown. This tooth is not being added to the shelf. This one is gone, too compromised. He sets it aside. A discard. But when the tooth is good, when it's a healthy tooth that simply couldn't be saved for reasons of the jaw, or when it's come from somewhere else entirely, this is the moment he examines it, turns it in the light, checks the root length and the enamel quality and the shade, categorizes it, files it away in his head. Mrs. Hartwell is recovering, colour coming back. The relief is almost visible, spreading through her body, the 6 weeks of sustained pain releasing now that the source of it is gone. She presses the cotton to her jaw and her hands aren't white-knuckled anymore. Her shoulders drop. Her whole face reorganizes itself into something softer. "Is it over?" she says, slightly muffled by the cotton. "It's over, you say." She laughs, which is not a reaction you expected. A small, slightly wet, slightly surprised laugh. "I've been so frightened," she says, "for weeks, for such a small thing." You look at the tooth in the dish where Mr. Kettrick set it. The small thing, the size of your smallest fingernail, the tiny object around which 6 weeks of dread had organised itself. They always seem smaller outside, you say. She looks at the tooth too. They really do, she says. After she leaves, Mr. Kettrick is in good spirits. Good spirits for Mr. Kettrick, which means he doesn't snap at you for anything in the first hour after. He's planning Lord Fenthorpe's fitting for 2 o'clock, and he's reviewing the work in the workroom, going through the upper plate one more time, checking the alignment of the mounted teeth, the polish of the ivory base. Lord Fenthorpe's teeth, his new teeth, his Waterloo grin. The full upper set took 3 months to complete. The ivory base, hippopotamus ivory, sourced from a specialist carver in Holborn, had to be carved to the exact contours of his lordship's upper jaw, which involved 3 separate impression appointments, with boiling wax being pressed into his lordship's mouth and held there until it cooled, which is not a comfortable procedure, and which his lordship endured with the stiff-necked dignity of a man determined not to show discomfort to his inferiors. 12 teeth in the upper set. 8 had to be sourced externally. The other 4 were his lordship's own teeth, pulled in the preceding months as they failed, one by one, cleaned and saved against exactly this use. The 8. That's what you're looking at. 8 teeth that didn't come from Lord Fenthorpe's jaw. You haven't asked where they came from. You haven't been told. But you've done the arithmetic. The same arithmetic that's been running in the back of your mind for months, and the arithmetic ends in Belgium, in June of last year, on a field that smelled of gunpowder and mud and blood, where someone moved through the dark with pliers. Lord Fenthorpe arrives at 2 o'clock in a sedan chair. Sedan chairs are slightly old-fashioned now. The carriage is more common, but his lordship is old enough to have grown up with sedan chairs and he prefers them. 2 bearers in his livery, a footman walking alongside. He's 58 years old, thin and upright, with the kind of face that was probably handsome at 30 and is now simply authoritative. He doesn't look at you when he comes in. He doesn't look at you when he sits in the chair. You're furniture in his assessment, and furniture doesn't require acknowledgement. This used to bother you. It doesn't anymore. Or rather, it bothers you, but less. Mr. Kettrick takes the plate from its padded box. It's a beautiful piece of work in the technical sense of beautiful. The ivory base fitted to his lordship's palate with a precision that involved hours of adjustment. The teeth, the 12 teeth, arranged in the correct orientation, the natural slight variations in shade and size preserved so that it looks like a real set rather than something stamped from a mould. It looks real because it is real. That's the whole point. "Open," Mr. Kettrick says. Lord Fenthorpe opens his mouth. Mr. Kettrick seats the plate, presses it gently against the upper palate, checks the spring mechanism. Most upper dentures in this era use a spring to press the upper and lower plates apart, which keeps them in place through pressure rather than adhesion, makes a small adjustment. Close, Lord Fenthorpe closes, chews experimentally. His expression, which has been carefully blank throughout, shifts slightly. Something loosens in his face. "How does that feel?" Mr. Kettrick asks. "Ah, remarkable," his lordship says, and there's something unexpected in his voice, something almost moved. "Remarkable." He opens his mouth and closes it again, feeling the plate's position, runs his tongue over the teeth, the new teeth, the ones that don't shift and click the way the ivory ones did. Then he does something that surprises you. He looks in the small hand mirror that Mr. Kettrick offers. He looks at his own reflection for a long time, at his own smile, which hasn't looked like that, like a real human smile in years. And the expression on his face is one that you'll remember for a long time, because you don't expect it from a man like Lord Fenthorpe, a man who looks at you as though you're furniture. He looks grateful, genuinely, simply grateful. For a moment, before the armour goes back on, before his face rearranges itself into proper aristocratic composure, he looks like a man who's been given something back that he thought was gone. Then the moment passes. "Excellent work," he says to Mr. Kettrick, not to you. "You'll receive the balance of your fee tomorrow." He hands back the mirror, stands. "Young man." This last is addressed to you. You look up, startled. "Yes, my lord." "Good work," he says, without looking at you, and walks out. You stand there for a moment. "Good work," from Lord Fenthorpe, addressed to you, Thomas Holt, apprentice dental surgeon of Shropshire, who drilled the hole for the spare incisor this morning, and has been thinking all day about Belgium. Mr. Kettrick is wrapping the box. "Clean up," he says. "Then we're going to Marsh." You stop. "Marsh," you say. "Today?" "He has a new lot in. I've been putting it off too long, and Fenthorpe's reminded me we need to restock." Mr. Kettrick sets the box down and looks at you with a slightly too calm expression. "It's time you saw the whole operation, Thomas. You've been here 8 months. You're not a child. You think about the trays in the workroom, the rows of sorted teeth, the bright white incisor from this morning, too white, newer than the rest. All right, you say. Good." He turns away. "Clean up the instruments first." Marsh. You've heard the name once or twice. Always casually the way Mr. Kettrick says it, the same tone he uses for his suppliers of wax and ivory and pumice, a business name, a commercial relationship, nothing requiring further explanation. Marsh has a new lot in. Marsh's prices have gone up. Marsh is reliable. Marsh's quality varies. You've never asked who Marsh is. You've been, in some carefully maintained way, not asking. Today you're going to find out. The surgery takes you 40 minutes to clean properly. Instruments sterilised in hot water and laid to dry. The chair wiped down. The blood, there's always blood, even the neatest extractions leave blood, cleaned from the leather armrests and the floor around the chair. The used cotton disposed of. The rosewater bowl refreshed. You're very thorough. Mr. Kettrick has trained you to be very thorough. Cleanliness in the surgery is one of his genuine beliefs, not just performance for patients, and he's passed it to you as something close to a religion. Clean instruments, clean hands, clean surfaces. More practitioners take up filthy habits and lose patients to infection than lose them to any other cause. He doesn't know why, exactly. Nobody in 1816 knows what we'd now call germ theory. But he's observed the correlation over 20 years of practice and drawn the correct practical conclusion, even without the theoretical framework to explain it. So, clean instruments, clean hands. You put on your coat and follow him out. The afternoon Strand is full. It's always full. The Strand is one of the great arteries of London, running from the city toward Westminster, lined with shops and coffee houses and the entrances to courts and alleys that lead to entire secondary worlds. You've walked this street hundreds of times now, and you still find something new in it every few days. A court you somehow missed before, a shop that's changed its window, a building that you'd been looking at for months before you noticed the carved detail above the fourth-floor window that someone put there 200 years ago for reasons now lost. Mr. Kettrick walks quickly. He's a purposeful walker, the kind who has a particular gait that says he's going somewhere, and you'd be advised not to obstruct the path. You've learned to keep up with him rather than ask him to slow down. You go north, off the Strand and into the network of streets behind it, heading toward Covent Garden and then bearing east. The streets get narrower as you go. The buildings lean toward each other overhead. The paving becomes less certain, patches of cobblestone giving way to older surfaces, uneven and worn, puddled from last night's rain. You pass the market at Covent Garden, which even in mid-afternoon has the residual presence of the morning's trade, vegetable leavings in the gutters, the smell of squashed fruit and fresh mud, a few late sellers packing up their remaining stock. A woman selling herbs is arguing with a man who might be the landlord of her stall or might be trying to steal from her. The argument has the practiced quality of one that's been happening for some time and will be happening again tomorrow. Further east, into streets you don't know. How far, you ask? Close, Mr. Kettrick says, which might mean 5 minutes or 20. It means 12. You count them. Marsh's establishment is in a court off a street whose name you can't read because the sign is weathered past legibility, on the ground floor of a building that was probably respectable once and isn't anymore. No sign above the door, no brass plate. A door that looks, from the outside, like a warehouse entrance. Wide, heavy, iron-braced. The kind of door that's built to keep things in rather than invite people in. Mr. Kettrick knocks, 3 times. A pause, then twice more. A moment, then a bolt draws back, and the door opens. The man who opens it is not what you expected, though you're not sure what you expected. He's ordinary, that's the thing. He's perhaps 35, medium height, wearing a decent brown coat and a hat that's seen better days, and he looks like half the working men you've passed in the streets today. He could be a porter, a clerk, A small merchant. Mr. Kettrick, he says. Not sir, just the name. We've been waiting. Come through. He looks at you. The boy, he says. My apprentice, Mr. Kettrick says. He's to know the whole trade. The man looks at you for a moment with an expression you can't quite read. Then he steps back and lets you in. The smell hits you before your eyes adjust. It's not what you expect. You've been bracing yourself on some level for something like decay, like death, like the sweet rot smell of the battlefield that you've never been on but can imagine from accounts in the newspapers. But that's not it. The dominant smell is something more prosaic. Salt. Salt and something slightly chemical, slightly acid. Brine. They preserve the teeth in brine. Your eyes adjust. You're in a large room. Larger than it looks from outside, running back considerably from the door, with shelves along both walls and a series of work tables down the centre. Candles and 2 oil lamps providing working light, though there are windows, high, small, closed, in the far wall. On the work tables, trays, many more trays than in Mr. Kettrick's workroom, and on the shelves, jars. Wide-mouthed glass jars sealed, filled with the brine solution, and in each jar, pale and suspended, teeth. Hundreds of teeth. Hundreds, maybe thousands. A woman is working at the far end of the central table. She might be 40, might be 50, with grey-streaked hair pinned back practically under a plain cap. Her hands move with the assurance of long practice, picking a tooth from one tray, examining it, setting it into one of several smaller trays sorted by some classification system that you don't immediately understand. Size, shape, condition. She barely looks up when you come in. Thomas, Mr. Kettrick says quietly. This is how it works. He leads you to the nearest work table. The teeth in the immediate trays are fresh, or fairly fresh. Cleaned. Somebody has cleaned them, removed the soft tissue from the roots, polished the enamel, but recently. The brine jars on the shelves behind hold the older stock. These came in from the coast, Mr. Kettrick says, a ship from Antwerp. Antwerp, which is near Belgium, which is near Waterloo. There are men, he continues, in the same level informational voice he uses when he's teaching you anatomy, who make a business of this. Some of them were at the battle themselves, camp followers. Some of them were soldiers who survived and stayed behind when the army moved on. They work through the summer. That's when the big harvest came in. Before, he pauses, before the other processes became significant. You understand what he means by other processes. The battlefield in summer, June, July. The dead in the summer heat. The teeth last longer than... He doesn't finish that sentence either. The brine keeps them indefinitely. This supply will be coming in for years, they estimate. The woman at the far end of the table glances up. She has dark eyes, sharp, professionally assessing. She looks at you the way Mr. Kettrick sometimes does when he's evaluating whether you're understanding a lesson. First visit, she says. Yes, you say. She holds up a tooth between 2 fingers. An incisor, bright and perfect. 18-year-old boy, probably, she says. Maybe 20. You can tell from the wear on the enamel or the lack of it. Older men, you start to see the grinding surfaces worn down. Younger men, the teeth are perfect, clean, strong. She sets it in a tray. The young ones died first, mostly. That's what they say. The infantry charges. You look at the tooth. 18 years old. The age of the older boys from your village who went to the war. Some of them came back, some of them didn't. And this will go... You start. Into someone's mouth, the woman says. Matter of fact, no apology or emphasis. Someone who can afford it anyway. Mrs. So-and-so of Belgrave Square. Wants a nice smile for the season. Can't eat properly without a full set. Pays Mr. Kettrick's fee, which is significant, and Mr. Kettrick pays us, which is less significant but still worth getting out of bed for. She picks up another tooth, examines it, sets it aside. The alternative is they wear carved bone, or ivory, or nothing. Ivory looks wrong and wears badly. Human teeth. She turns another one in the light. Nothing looks better, nothing fits better. You can't improve on the design. This is the speech, you realise, that she gives to everyone who comes here for the first time. The speech that makes the thing make sense. That fits it into an economy, a logic, a supply chain like any other supply chain, just one that starts somewhere most people prefer not to look too closely. You can't improve on the design. You stand there in the room full of preserved teeth, while the afternoon light comes through the high windows and the woman sorts and catalogues and Mr. Kettrick talks to Marsh himself, a thin, quiet man who appears from a back room, who looks at you with the same careful assessment as everyone else in this place. And you try to organise what you're feeling. It's not exactly horror. You've done 43 extractions. You've cleaned up blood twice a week for 8 months. Mr. Kettrick showed you a dissection once at St. Bartholomew's Hospital, a formal educational event, and you didn't faint and you didn't go outside, and you thought you understood something about yourself and your capacity for this work. This feels different. Not because it's more disturbing. In a medical sense, it probably isn't. But because of the strange intimacy of it. The teeth are sorted by type. The incisors, the canines, the premolars and molars. Each one still holding the exact shape of the mouth it came from. The slight characteristic curve that no two people share exactly. The woman picks up a molar. Holds it toward the candlelight. It's a back tooth, broad and flat. The root system complex and branching. Perfect condition. Sergeant's tooth, she says, and you blink. What? Sergeant's tooth. She glances up. Field rank. The officers were usually mounted. If you're mounted, you're less likely to catch a musket ball in the front of the skull. The infantry, the regular infantry, lots of face wounds, lots of damaged teeth which are useless to us. But the sergeants, the field sergeants who had enough rank to have slightly better positioning but not enough to ride, she sets it down. They tend to die cleanly, which sounds terrible, and it is terrible. But from a professional standpoint, she shrugs, from a professional standpoint, you look around the room, at the rows of jars, at the sorted trays, at the woman who could be the proprietor of a haberdashery somewhere, sitting with her careful hands and her professional assessment. From a professional standpoint, the dead of Waterloo are the finest supply of quality human teeth that the European denture trade has ever seen. 50,000 dead in a single day. 50,000 men's mouths. The arithmetic, finally and completely resolved. Mr. Kettrick purchases 3 dozen incisors and 2 dozen premolars. He pays in coin, which Marsh counts carefully, and receipts in a ledger that he writes in a small quick hand, the handwriting of a former clerk. The whole transaction is businesslike and unremarkable. No different in its form from the transactions at any of Mr. Kettrick's other suppliers. You carry the package. Outside, in the narrow court, the late afternoon air smells of coal smoke and old cabbage, which is the smell of London, which is the smell of home now, and you walk behind Mr. Kettrick back toward the Strand with the package under your arm. It's wrapped in oilcloth tied with twine. It weighs almost nothing. 3 dozen incisors and 2 dozen premolars, 57 individual teeth, more or less. each one a small hard piece of someone who died on a particular day, at a particular moment, in a particular field in Belgium. "You're quiet," Mr. Kettrick says. "Yes, sir." "Say it." You think about how to say it. "The woman at the table," you start, "she called them sergeant's teeth. Field rank. Like there was a grade of quality." "There is a grade of quality," Mr. Kettrick says. "I know, I understand that. But she was talking about men. Men who were alive a year ago. Men who had..." You stop. Start again. "My cousin went to the wars. He came back. He was at Waterloo." Mr. Kettrick is quiet for a moment. "And his teeth are still in his head, presumably." "Yes, sir." "Then he was lucky," he says, "in more than one way." He glances at you sideways, and there's something in his expression. Not apology. Mr. Kettrick doesn't do apology, but something like honesty. Something like the expression of a man who has spent 20 years in a profession that requires a particular kind of clear-eyedness and has paid for it in small ways. "The men who died at Waterloo were already dead, Thomas. They died for king country, as the newspapers say, which is another way of saying they died because they were standing in the wrong field on the wrong day, because that is what happens to infantry in wars. The teeth did not kill them. The teeth are what they are now." He walks for a moment without speaking. Someone had to do it, and they were going to decompose otherwise. Everything decomposes. The question is simply whether anything useful can be extracted from... He stops himself. "That is a thing I say to myself sometimes," he says more quietly, "when I have to. This is, you will reflect later, the most personal thing Silas Kettrick has ever said to you. This careful admission that there is a speech you give yourself, a rationalization, a professional framework that you apply to the thing in order to work with it and continue working with it. The acknowledgement that the framework exists means the framework is necessary, which means the thing underneath the framework is not in fact as comfortable as the professional face suggests. You walk the rest of the way back in silence. The package under your arm weighs nothing. It weighs nothing, and you feel its weight in every step. That evening you sit in the workroom while Mr. Kettrick goes over his accounts in the surgery. The afternoon patients have all gone. The last coal in the grate is burning low. Outside, the Strand is moving into its evening mode. The shop traffic thinning, replaced by the restaurant and theatre crowds. The coaches becoming more numerous and more finely sprung. The air carrying a different quality of conversation. You're cleaning the new teeth. This is also part of the work. The supply from Marsh is cleaned, yes, but cleaned to a field standard. The soft tissue removed, the gross contamination addressed, not to the surgical standard that Mr. Kettrick requires before a tooth goes into a patient's mouth. That work falls to you. The process is a soft brush, pumice powder mixed with water, each tooth worked individually under the water in the ceramic bowl, then examined again, then laid on the drying cloth, then examined a third time. Your hands have been in cold water for 40 minutes and your fingertips are white and wrinkled. The pumice has rubbed a thin spot on the pad of your right thumb. You hold up an incisor in the candlelight. In the light, it's almost beautiful. The enamel has this quality, this translucency at the edge where the tooth is thinnest, that catches the light in a particular way. When you're making a denture, this is one of the things that makes human teeth look more natural than carved ivory, the translucency. Ivory is opaque, flat, slightly too white. Real teeth have this inner light to them, this layered quality where the enamel lets through just a little of what's underneath. You turn the tooth slowly. The root is intact. tapered, narrowing to a rounded tip. The root surface has a slightly rougher texture than the enamel above, minutely pocked and grooved where the bone had held it, where the periodontal ligament had attached, those thousands of tiny fibres that had held this tooth in a living jaw, that had transmitted pressure and sensation from enamel to bone, that had made this tooth capable of feeling the difference between a hard surface and a soft one. Gone now, everything that made this tooth part of a person, gone. What remains is the hard structure. The calcium phosphate of the enamel and dentine, laid down over years, fibre by fibre, in patterns that no two mouths produce exactly the same way. This tooth is from someone 18 or 20 years old. You know that from the surface wear. You know nothing else. You set it in the dried tray and pick up the next one. When Mr. Kettrick comes to the doorway an hour later, you're still working. The candle has burned down considerably. The pile of cleaned teeth is larger than the uncleaned pile now. You're still at it, he says, nearly done. He looks at the work, at you. You did well today, he says. Seeing Marsh, some apprentices, he pauses. Some of them don't last after the first visit. They decide the work isn't for them. I haven't decided anything yet, you say? No, he says. I don't suppose you have. A pause. My first visit to a supplier like Marsh, he says, was in 1793. I was 20 years old. Before Waterloo, obviously, the supply was different then. Less. He chooses the word carefully. Concentrated. Where did it come from before? He leans against the doorframe, considering whether to continue this conversation. Then, several places, grave robbers primarily. The resurrection men who worked the London churchyards for the anatomy schools also sold teeth. They were at the body anyway, and the teeth were worth taking. Hospital deaths sometimes if the right people were paid. The poor, occasionally, who needed money badly enough to sell a tooth or two, he pauses. That last practice is still common. You know what he means. You've seen it once. Not here, but in the street. A woman sitting on a low stool near St. Giles's, in front of the tooth drawers set up. Having a tooth pulled not because it ached, but because the tooth drawer was paying a penny for healthy teeth. The woman's face, tired and calculating and entirely clear-eyed about the transaction. The tooth drawer's face, professionally neutral, the face of a man buying a commodity. You were 17 when you saw that, and you didn't know what you were seeing. Now you're still 17, and you understand exactly what you were seeing, and the fact that you're the same age in both moments troubles you sometimes. Before Waterloo, Mr. Kettrick continues, there were other battlefield supplies, American conflicts, the Peninsular War, but nothing on the Waterloo scale, nothing. He exhales. Never so many, so fast, so clean. So clean. So many. So fast. In 8 hours. 50,000 men. Does it? You stop. Start again. Does it stop mattering? At some point? Does it just become the work? He looks at you for a long time. It becomes the work, he says finally. It doesn't stop mattering. Those are two different things. And the difference between them is what separates a competent practitioner from a dangerous one. If it stops mattering entirely, you lose the judgment. You start seeing only the material and not the other dimension. And that's when you start making mistakes, bad matches, careless work. He pushes off the doorframe. The day it stops mattering, I'd close the surgery, he says, and leaves. You sit in the cooling workroom with the candle and the trays of teeth, and you think about what he said, and you clean the last 6 teeth one by one, slowly and with full attention. Because the day it stops mattering. Yes, The next morning you wake before the bells, which doesn't happen often. The room is dark and cold, that deep October cold that has started to get into everything, and your breath makes a small cloud in the darkness when you exhale. You lie still for a moment and listen to London. Even in the middle of the night, or what passes for the middle of the night in a city of 1,000,000 people, there's never true silence. There are always wheels somewhere, always someone calling out somewhere. The river, audible on the right kind of night, has its own persistent sound, its deep, soft movement. You've been thinking since Mr. Kettrick's words last night, thinking in the way you sometimes do when something has shifted in your understanding of the world, and you're not sure yet what shape the new understanding will take. 8 months ago, you came to London with a letter of introduction from your father's cousin, who knew someone who worked for someone who knew Mr. Kettrick was looking for an apprentice. You came because a dental apprenticeship was a skilled trade, better than most, better than what your village could offer. You came because the city was possible, not inevitable, but possible, and possible was enough to act on. You thought you were going to learn a craft, and you are learning a craft. You're learning that the craft of dentistry is, in 1816, partly medicine and partly artistry, and partly a business operation that extends far beyond the surgery walls, that draws on supply chains that begin on continental battlefields and end in the mouths of the English aristocracy. You thought the worst part would be the extractions. The extractions are not the worst part. You get up, wash your face in the cold water, listen to Mrs. Cadwallader stirring somewhere below. Today is a market day, which means several things. It means the city will be even more chaotic than usual around the main market areas. It means the street dentists will be out, the tooth drawers, the lower end of the profession, the ones who work from carts and stools in open spaces. And it means that Mr. Kettrick has asked you this week to go to Smithfield with his order for an ivory carver near the market who supplies the denture bases. Smithfield, the great livestock market north of the city. Meat and blood and cattle, and just now, in the morning, the tooth drawers who set up on the edges of market days when the crowds are thick. You go, after opening up the surgery and laying out the instruments and banking the fire to warm the room. Mr. Kettrick isn't in yet. He has a habit of seeing his better-class patients in the early morning at their own homes, a house-call service that the fashionable dentists offer, and you leave him a note on the counter about your errand. Outside, the October morning is properly cold now, the kind of cold that has weight to it, that settles on the back of your neck and works its way under the collar of your coat. Your right shoe is letting in moisture at the crack in the sole, and within half a block your right sock is wet, a condition you've developed a profound philosophical relationship with over the course of the London autumn. The streets between the Strand and Smithfield take you through a version of London that's different from the fashionable street where you spend most of your working time. North and east, the buildings becoming older, lower, more crowded together, the streets narrowing, the smell changing, less coal, more the raw animal smell of a city that still runs largely on horsepower, with everything that entails. You pass a woman selling hot coffee from a cart. You buy a cup, a penny, which is expensive, but the cold is real and your fingers are stiff, and drink it walking, which is the only way to drink hot coffee in London without it going cold before you can finish it. The cup is shared, the same ceramic cup handed to each customer in succession, rinsed cursorily between uses in a bucket of water that's gone grey with the morning's work. This bothers you slightly less than it would have 8 months ago. Your tolerance for things that bother you has, in many ways, expanded considerably. The coffee is strong and slightly burnt and exactly right. You hear Smithfield before you see it. The cattle sound, the low continuous noise of several hundred animals confined in a relatively small space, overlaid with the shouting of drovers and the general percussive chaos of a market in full morning operation. Then the smell, which hits you at the corner of Long Lane, livestock and blood and sawdust, and the particular sharp smell of fresh dung from animals that have been standing in place for hours. This is one of London's great markets, one of the oldest, running back to medieval times, when this open space outside the city walls was the natural gathering point for the livestock trade. Today it serves the same basic function. Animals are brought here to be sold, and many of them are brought here to be slaughtered on the premises or nearby, and the byproducts of slaughter, the hides, the tallow, the bone, become the raw materials for a dozen other industries. You navigate the edges. You're not going into the market proper. The ivory carver's premises are on a side street. But the edges of Smithfield on market day have their own dense life. And there, in a cleared space near the corner of the market's southeast edge, is what you came part of the way to see. The tooth drawer's setup is simple. A folding table, a wooden chair with arms slightly wider than normal. The drawer himself, a broad man with a red face and very large hands, stands behind the chair in a leather apron. A boy, maybe 12, stands a few feet off with a drum, though he's not drumming yet. Early, the crowd isn't thick enough to require the drum. This is the other end of the trade, the public end, the visible end, where Mr. Kettrick's surgery is private by appointment, upstairs, for the class of people who have appointments and can go upstairs. This is the street, for everyone else. There's already a small queue, 4 people waiting, shifting from foot to foot in the cold, a man in labourer's clothes, one hand pressed to his jaw. An older woman, a girl beside her who might be her daughter. A young man, apprentice by the look of his clothes, who keeps glancing around as though he's worried someone will see him. The drawer is working. The person in the chair is a middle-aged man, grey-bearded, stocky. His hands grip the chair arms. His body is rigid with the particular tension of someone who's decided to submit to something and is regretting the decision at every moment. The drawer says something to him. You can't hear it over the market noise, and the man opens his mouth. The drawer doesn't use the elaborate instrument set of the surgery. He uses what looks like a simple key-shaped extractor, a long-handled tool with a claw at the end. You've read about these. The dental key, it's called, and it works through rotation rather than the more precise rocking technique Mr. Kettrick uses. It's faster, it's less precise. The rate of fractured roots is higher. He works it into position. You see the man in the chair's body stiffen further, the knuckles going white on the chair arms. The drawer rotates. There's a very brief interval during which you observe the exact moment of extraction, even from this distance. The drawer stepping back, something in his hand, and then the man in the chair says something loudly that the market noise swallows and puts both hands to his face. The drawer holds up the tooth, examines it quickly, sets it in a small box near the table. The man in the chair is breathing hard. The drawer says something to him, something that involves gesturing toward his mouth, and the man nods. The drawer passes him a cloth. The man presses it to his jaw, stands with some difficulty and moves off, still holding his jaw, but moving under his own power. Next, the penny extraction market, the street trade, and the box near the table, the box where the extracted tooth went. You understand now, fully. The whole mechanism, top to bottom. Mr. Kettrick's surgery is the top, the fashionable end. Lord Fenthorpe's Waterloo grin, set in hippopotamus ivory, fitted with professional precision, priced at more than you earn in a year. This is the bottom, the street, the penny extraction, the box, the teeth in that box, the ones the drawer can use, the healthy ones, the ones that came out cleanly, will go to someone like Marsh, who will sort them and clean them and brine them and sell them to someone like Mr. Kettrick, who will drill them and peg them and fit them and charge accordingly. The poor man's tooth extracted for a penny in the street will end up, a year from now, in the mouth of someone who'd never dream of visiting Smithfield on a market day. This has probably always been how it works, not just now, not just Waterloo. This specific shape of thing, the labour and pain of the poor disappearing into the consumption of the rich without acknowledgement, without trace, without the rich ever needing to consider where the thing came from. Waterloo just made the supply, as Mr. Kettrick said, more reliable. You watch the drawer work through the queue. The second patient is the older woman. Not her, as it turns out, but the girl beside her, who might be 16 and who sits in the chair with a tightness around her eyes that looks like fear turned to resolution. Her mother stands beside the chair holding her hand. The drawer examines her mouth, says something, points at a tooth. And here is where you see the mechanism in a different register. The girl shakes her head. The drawer says something else. The girl's mother says something. The girl looks at her mother, then back at the drawer. She opens her mouth. Points to a tooth herself. Not the tooth the drawer indicated, but another one. The drawer examines this new tooth. Shakes his own head. More conversation. The girl's mother says something else. Something more urgent. You can't hear any of it. But you know what's happening. You know exactly what's happening. The drawer had indicated a bad tooth, a tooth to be pulled because it was past saving. The girl pointed to a different tooth, a good tooth, a healthy tooth. Her mother is telling her to let him take the good tooth, because the bad tooth is worth nothing. The drawer charges for pulling a bad tooth, but the good tooth pays. The woman needs the money. Whatever the penny price is for a good healthy incisor from a 16-year-old girl, she needs it. More than her daughter needs the tooth. The girl opens her mouth, you look away. You complete your errand at the Ivory Carver's, a small shop on Cow Lane that smells of bone dust and the particular sweet oiliness of the carving tools, where a man the size of a large armchair produces delicate palette shapes in hippopotamus ivory with the focused attention of a master craftsman, and who hands you your package and takes your payment and says good morning with the flat satisfaction of a man who has completed a transaction correctly. And you walk back to the Strand in the October cold with the package under your arm. The girl in the chair at Smithfield, 17, maybe. You think about Mrs. Hartwell and the tear on her cheek, the relief that spread through her body when the tooth was out, the 6 weeks of dread resolved. You think about Lord Fenthorpe and the moment of surprised gratitude, the armour going back on. Good work. You think about the girl. The teeth don't tell you who they came from. That's the point, really. That's the mechanism. Once they're cleaned and sorted and brined and delivered in oilcloth packages, they're just teeth. The dentist doesn't know. The patient doesn't know. The beautiful smile in the drawing-room mirror is utterly, completely, permanently disconnected from the girl at Smithfield, or from the field at Waterloo. By the time you get back to the surgery, Mr. Kettrick's with the patient. You leave the Ivory Carver's package on the workbench, hang up your coat and take your place. The day passes. Patients come and go. You assist and observe and hand instruments, and sometimes when it's a simpler case, you do the work yourself under his eye. A cleaning, a scaling, which is the slow, careful removal of calcified deposits from the tooth surface. A process that requires precise hand pressure and sharp instruments, and the ability to feel through the tool the exact boundary between deposit and enamel. You're getting better at it. Mr. Kettrick said so last week, which, translated from his particular dialect of understatement, means you're getting considerably better. In the late afternoon, between patients, you make a decision. Sir, you say. Mr. Kettrick is writing in his ledger. He makes a small sound that acknowledges you without committing to full attention. The box at the tooth drawers, you say. At Smithfield this morning, the healthy teeth he takes in payment. Where do they go from there? A pause in the writing. To an intermediary, he says. Not always to Marsh directly. There are several collection points in the city. They aggregate from dozens of street drawers and bring the lots to Marsh or to his competitors. And Marsh's competitors supply the other surgeries, yes, he looks up. There are perhaps 30 to 40 surgeons in London who make dentures at the level of quality I maintain. We all source from the same 3 or 4 suppliers, and they all... You stop. They all got their supply from Belgium. The better quality, yes. The street teeth come in regardless. The Waterloo supply is what elevated. What changed the upper end of the market? He sets down his pen. Before Waterloo, a full human tooth set was extremely expensive because the supply was limited and unreliable. Now it's merely expensive, accessible to the prosperous middle class as well as the aristocracy. A slight pause. Which is, from a business perspective, significant. You think about the girl at Smithfield, from a business perspective. The girl, you say, at the street drawers today, selling a good tooth. Yes. How much does she get? The drawer pays her. For the tooth. Mr. Kettrick considers. For a good incisor in the street trade, perhaps 3 pence, sometimes 4. Depends on the quality. Depends on the drawer. 3 pence. And you? You choose the word carefully. When you sell the finished denture, for a full upper set of human teeth, on hippopotamus ivory base, with fitting appointments. He names a figure. It's a large figure. More than your monthly wages. More than most people in that Smithfield Market QC in 6 months. Right, you say. He looks at you. This bothers you, he says. Yes, it bothers me. Because of the disproportion. Yes. He's quiet for a moment. Then, the girl with the 3 pence gets 3 pence she didn't have, which she needs. She also gets the extraction done for free. Normally she'd pay the penny to have a bad tooth pulled, but the drawer will pull the good tooth at no charge because the tooth itself is the payment, so she gains a penny there. 4 pence net. He pauses. Is that better or worse than what she had before the transaction? You think about it. Better. Obviously better. In the immediate. The immediate is what she can act on, he says. The counterfactual, the world in which she doesn't sell the tooth, keeps the tooth, and has an extra tooth in her head, also exists. But she's not in that world. She's in this one. In this one she has choices, and she made the best one available to her. But the choice exists because of poverty. Yes. No hesitation. The choice exists because of poverty. I don't know how to fix poverty. I know how to fix teeth. He picks up his pen again. Both of those things can be true at the same time. He goes back to the ledger. You stand there for a moment, feeling the familiar frustration of an argument that's technically correct and still somehow unsatisfying. The rightness of the logic and the wrongness of the world it describes, coexisting in the same space. Both of those things can be true at the same time. You go back to work. 3 weeks after the visit to Marsh, Mr. Kettrick takes you to Guy's Hospital. Guy's is across the river in Southwark, a 10-minute walk from London Bridge. It's a teaching hospital founded in 1721 by Thomas Guy, a bookseller who made his fortune in the South Sea bubble and left it to build a hospital for the incurable and hopeless who were being turned away from St. Thomas's next door. The incurable and hopeless, that's who Guy's was for originally. Now it's one of the great teaching hospitals of Europe. The surgeons who work there are among the best in England, and the students who attend the lectures are paying considerable fees for the education. You're not a student at Guy's, you're a guest of Mr. Kettrick's, which is a different thing, and the surgical wards you're allowed to enter are accordingly limited. But there's a particular room that Mr. Kettrick visits once a month, and that room is the dental clinic. Dental care at Guy's is provided free of charge to the hospital's patients. This is relatively unusual. Most dental care in London is entirely private practice, and the poor, unless they're paying the penny at the street drawers or selling their teeth, have no access to any care at all. Guy's is different. Once a week, anyone who comes to the hospital can get a tooth pulled. Free. No charge. The queue for this service extends from the room itself, down a corridor, around a corner, and out of the building entirely. You stand at the end of the queue with Mr. Kettrick for a moment looking at it. The people in the queue, a man with a jaw so swollen it's distorting the shape of his face, a hot red swelling that speaks of deep abscess, the kind of infection that sometimes does, travel inward, into the bone, into the bloodstream. A woman with 3 children, the smallest of them no more than 5, who sits on her mother's hip and regards you with the large-eyed calm of a child who doesn't understand what's about to happen to her mouth. An old man who's wrapped his head in a cloth and is making a sound that's not quite crying but is close to it. A sustained high, almost inaudible note that's the sound of sustained pain. At the front of the queue, running the dental clinic, is a man named Mr. Forbes. He's perhaps 35, Mr. Kettrick's contact here, a surgeon who's specialised in dental work when specialisation is still considered somewhat eccentrically specific. He and Mr. Kettrick exchange the brief business-like greetings of men who respect each other professionally. Then Mr. Forbes looks at you. "This is the apprentice," he says. "Thomas Holt," Mr. Kettrick says. Mr. Forbes examines you with the assessing eye he probably applies to everything. "How long have you been extracting?" he asks. 8 months, 43 procedures. Extractions only, and cleanings, some scaling. Any prosthodontics? Assisting, you say. Drilling and mounting. I haven't done a fitting solo, he nods. Make some small internal calculation. "Come with me," he says. "I'll need an extra pair of hands today." The clinic is a long room with 4 chairs arranged along one wall. 3 other practitioners are already working. The room smells different from Mr. Kettrick's surgery. Larger, colder despite the fire, more institutional. Carbolic soap over the blood and saliva. The background noise of the hospital filtering through the walls. Distant voices, the sound of movement, occasionally something that might be pain in a different register than dental pain. You're given a position at the 4th chair. The first patient who comes to you is the man with the abscess. Up close, the swelling is worse than you thought. The left side of his face, from the jaw to the cheekbone, is hot and tight, the skin over it shining with the tension of the fluid underneath. He can barely open his mouth. Mr. Forbes comes over, examines him, explains to you what you're looking at. Lower second molar, he says quietly near your ear. The abscess has tracked along the jaw. If we don't relieve it today, it goes into the neck. Once it's in the neck, he doesn't finish. You know the answer. Once the infection is in the neck, in the fascial planes of the throat, it can compress the airway. It can spread to the chest. It can kill, and it can kill quickly, and it can kill someone who seemed to be suffering from nothing worse than a toothache. He needs the tooth out and the abscess drained, Mr. Forbes says. Can you do the extraction? You look at the man. He's watching you with the too patient expression of someone in extreme pain who has learned to wait, because waiting is what pain eventually teaches you. Yes, you say. The extraction is difficult. The infection has made the tissue around the tooth swollen and hypersensitive, and even the preliminary work with the elevator makes the man's body respond with the involuntary spasms of pain, every muscle tensing. You work slowly, carefully, talking to him as Mr. Kettrick talks to patients, the quiet professional narration. Here, now. Breathe. This part. That's it. His hands grip the chair arms white-knuckled through the whole procedure. The tooth comes out in two pieces. The root fractures under the pressure of the forceps. The infection has undermined the bone around the socket, and you have to retrieve the broken section with a fine-pointed elevator, working carefully in the swollen tissue, which bleeds freely and keeps obscuring your field of view. 8 minutes. Longer than it should have been. Mr. Forbes takes over for the drainage. A lancet, a quick, precise incision into the most prominent point of the swelling, a rush of fluid that is not blood, that has the thick and terrible quality of infection releasing. And the man in the chair makes a sound that's part pain and part, unmistakably, relief. The pressure releasing. The thing that's been building for days or weeks finally going. When it's over, when the dressing is applied and the instructions given and the man is helped to his feet, he looks at you. He doesn't say anything. He nods. One nod. You nod back. He walks out, one hand still pressed to his jaw, and you clean the instruments and prepare for the next patient, and your hands are shaking slightly, which is something they did in the early days and which you thought had stopped but apparently hasn't. Just in the aftermath, just when the case was difficult, the shaking stops after a minute. You work through the morning. 15 patients in 4 hours. Extractions primarily. This is a free clinic, which means the patients coming here are the ones who've been putting it off, who've been managing with whatever's available, who come when the management fails. The cases are further progressed, the extractions more complicated, the tissue more compromised. Between patients, Mr. Forbes shows you things, the early signs of scurvy in the gums, the softening, the bleeding, the way the gums begin to recede and the teeth begin to loosen, the characteristic look of syphilitic decay, which has a pattern different from regular caries. The mouth as diagnostic window, the mouth as the visible record of a life's nutrition, habits, diseases, economics. This patient, Mr. Forbes says quietly between two patients, indicating a man who's just sat down, is probably 50. The man looks at least 65, possibly older. The teeth tell you? The teeth, the gums, the jawbone where I can palpate it. Chronic malnutrition throughout his life. Periods of severe shortage in childhood, which is visible in the enamel. You see these horizontal lines, he indicates with the probe. Those are enamel hyperplasia, periods when the enamel formation was interrupted by illness or starvation, usually between ages 2 and 5. Every line is a year of bad nutrition. Lines in the enamel, the physical record of childhood hunger. written in the teeth, indelible. You look at the lines. He probably looks his age, Mr. Forbes continues. It's just that malnutrition in early life ages you faster. The man in the chair is looking at the ceiling, waiting. You begin the examination. 15 patients in 4 hours. 3 more complicated than there should have been. 2 less complicated, 10 exactly as expected. Mr. Forbes works through them at a pace that you find extraordinary. Not hurried, never hurried, but completely without waste. Every movement exact. No energy expended on anything that doesn't need energy. You're exhausted by noon. Mr. Kettrick, who has spent the morning with Mr. Forbes's senior colleague, finds you outside the clinic door sitting on a chair in the corridor. How was it, he says. 15 patients, you say, in 4 hours. Yes, for free. For free? You sit there for a moment. He does this every week, every Wednesday, has for 10 years. You think about Marsh's workroom, the rows of brined teeth, the careful, business-like sorting. You think about Mr. Forbes working steadily through a room full of people who've been putting it off until they couldn't anymore. 2 different parts of the same world, 2 different ways of relating to the same problem. Both things can be true at the same time, you say. Mr. Kettrick looks at you. Something I said, he asks. Something you said. He nods, as though this is satisfactory, and leads you back into the hospital to say goodbye to Mr. Forbes. That night, walking back to Mrs. Cadwallader's in the evening dark, you stop on London Bridge. This is something you've been meaning to do for a while, not for any particular reason, just because you've crossed this bridge 100 times, and you've never stood still on it long enough to actually look. The bridge at night is different from the bridge in the day. In the day it's all traffic, movement, the crowded thoroughfare that it's been since Roman times. At night the traffic thins, the carts and pedestrians mostly gone, the bridge half empty and the sounds of the river rising up through the missing spaces. You stand at the railing. The Thames beneath you is dark and moving, the surface catching what little light there is from the moon half hidden in cloud. Out toward the middle, the current is stronger. You can see it or sense it, the slight differential in the movement of the surface. Ships anchored upstream and downstream showing their lanterns, the occasional light of a night waterman moving steadily across the water. London stretches in both directions along the river banks. To the north, the city, with its churches, their towers visible even at night as dark shapes against the slightly less dark sky. St. Paul's Dome, barely visible in the murk, but there, present, enormous. The tangle of streets you've been learning for 8 months. To the south, Southwark. Darker, lower, the buildings less grand. The hospital you've just come from, somewhere in that dark. All the things the city preferred to put south of the river and then not look at too carefully. The river between them, the city's spine, its highway and its sewer and its history all at once. You've been thinking about the girl at Smithfield, about the man with the abscess, about the 50-year-old who looked 65, the lines in his enamel from the hungry years when he was 2, when he was 5, about Lord Fenthorpe's surprised gratitude, the Waterloo grin, about the woman in Marsh's workroom sorting with practised hands, Sargent's teeth. All of it connects. All of it is one thing, seen from different angles. The same world, viewed from the surgery and from the street, from the fashionable shop and from the military field in Belgium, from the girl selling her tooth and the nobleman buying a smile. The river moves below you, the same river it's been for 1,000 years, the same water flowing through the same channel, carrying the same business of the city in the same dark. You stand there until the cold gets into you properly, and then you walk home. November comes, and with it the fogs. You weren't ready for the London fog. Nobody tells you about it beforehand, or rather, people tell you about it, but the telling doesn't convey the thing itself, the way that some experiences are immune to description, and can only be known through having them. The first proper fog of the season arrives on a Wednesday in early November. You wake to what seems like darkness, but is, in fact, the light of 8 o'clock in the morning filtered through a density of sulphurous coal smoke and water vapour that turns the air the colour of old mustard, not grey, yellow, the particular yellow of London coal fog, which is not a natural thing, not weather, but the exhaled breath of a million fires laid over the cold damp air of the river valley and held there by the still weather. You go outside and the fog closes around you at arm's length. The Strand, which you can walk with your eyes closed by now, is barely navigable. Not from any actual visual impairment. You can still see the buildings on either side, the few other pedestrians moving through the yellow dark, but from the quality of the air, which is not quite air, which has substance to it, which coats the inside of your nose and throat with a thin grey film of soot and sulphur. The smell of it is the smell of industry, the smell of coal being burned in 1,000,000 grates by 1,000,000 households and 10,000 workshops, the accumulated combustion of an entire city compacted into this valley, unable to dissipate. By the time you reach the surgery, your coat has developed a faint grey patina on the shoulders. The handkerchief you press to your mouth is grey when you take it away. Inside, the fire in the grate, the rosewater, the familiar smell of the work. Even the rosewater seems muted by the day's quality, everything slightly dimmed. Mr. Kettrick arrives looking exactly as he always looks, which you've come to understand is a kind of statement, a refusal, through precision of dress and manner, to acknowledge that the city sometimes tries to defeat you. Lord Aldermore this afternoon, he says. He's interested in a partial lower set. Lord Aldermore, an older man, peer of the realm, whose address is in Cavendish Square. His letter of inquiry came last month, referred by Lord Fenthorpe's secretary, reputation travelling through the aristocratic networks, the way information travels through coffee houses from one person to the next. Lord Aldermore arrives in a carriage at 2 o'clock. He's different from Lord Fenthorpe. Older, broader, with a politician's practised affability. He's served in various government positions, the kind of man who's been part of the management of the country for 40 years in one capacity or another. He greets Mr. Kettrick with the direct warmth of a man who considers himself accessible, which he probably does, which is part of the performance of accessibility that makes powerful men effective. He looks at you. Young man, how long have you been with Mr. Kettrick? 8 months, my lord. 8 months. He says it like he's calculating something. Your first placement? Yes, my lord. And London? Your first time in the city? Yes, my lord. How do you find it? Larger than I expected, you say. And different. He smiles. Different from what? From what I thought it would be. He nods, as though this is a satisfactory answer, and turns his attention to Mr. Kettrick with the smooth efficiency of a man who's finished with one conversation and is now in the next one. The impression appointment goes smoothly. Lord Aldermore is a better patient than his social class might suggest. Matter of fact about the process. No fuss about the wax, no unnecessary comment about the discomfort of the tray. While Mr. Kettrick is taking the impression, you're managing the logistics of the moment, Lord Aldermore, with the impression tray in his mouth and the wax setting. makes a sound that might be a question. "Don't speak," Mr. Kettrick says. "Hold still, another 2 minutes." Lord Aldermore holds still. You stand there holding the bowl, watching the wax set, and you find yourself thinking about where the teeth for Lord Aldermore's lower set will come from, whether they'll come from Marsh, whether they'll come ultimately from Belgium, whether they'll come from a soldier who might have been the age you are now, who might have been from a village like yours, who might have been standing in a field in June last year thinking about, what? Not about this. Not about the November in London in a year that wouldn't come for him, about the yellow fog and the wax setting in a peer's mouth. The wax sets. Mr. Kettrick removes the tray, examines the impression, nods. "Good," he says. "I'll have the carvings ready for assessment in 3 weeks." Lord Aldermore works his jaw carefully. "Fine," he says. "And the human tooth option, you confirm that's possible?" "Entirely possible. I have the supply." Fenthorpe says they're considerably better than ivory. Considerably. The wear characteristics, the appearance, the adhesion to the base, all superior. Lord Aldermore nods. "Then human teeth. The best you have." The best you have. He means, without knowing he means it, the freshest, the youngest, the teeth with the deepest roots and the brightest enamel and the most perfect structure, because they came from 18-year-old boys who died in perfect physical condition, the infantry who had to be fit to march, on a day that ended the most significant military conflict of the century. "Of course," Mr. Kettrick says. He shows Lord Aldermore out. The door closes. The carriage moves away outside. Mr. Kettrick stands at the window for a moment, watching it go. "The best you have," he says quietly, "not to you." Then he turns away from the window and goes back to work. December. The cold deepens. The fogs return, sometimes for 3 or 4 days running. The city existing in its own sealed amber light, the sun reduced to a pale suggestion somewhere above the murk. Your right shoe has been resoled once and is already beginning to crack again in a different place. Your mother's letter, when it finally arrives, is 3 weeks old by then and smells of the Shropshire countryside in a way that hits you unexpectedly hard when you unfold it. A smell of clean air and something green, and the particular quality of space that you'd stopped noticing until it was gone. She asks if you're eating well. She asks if Mr. Kettrick is treating you properly. She says your father has had a good autumn with the second harvest, and your sister is engaged to be married to a farmer from the next village, and the whole village talks about the battle and the aftermath and the boys who didn't come back. Some of them, she writes carefully, came back changed in ways their families are still understanding. You write back. You tell her you're eating well. Mr. Kettrick is demanding but fair. You tell her about the city, some of it, the Strand and the fog and the market at Smithfield, but not all of it. Not Marsh. Not the trays of sorted teeth. Not the girl at the chair. You tell her you're learning a great deal. This is true. All of it is true. The omissions are their own kind of truth, the truth of what a 17-year-old writes to his mother about the thing he has chosen to do with his life. You fold the letter and seal it, and leave it with Mrs. Cadwallader's boy to post. The work continues. December brings a different quality of patience. The wealthy ones, Lord Aldermore's class, become more active in the pre-Christmas season. Society events, dinners, the social calendar that drives the fashionable world, all of which require being seen, and being seen requires looking right, and looking right for a generation of people who've spent their lives losing teeth requires dentures, a new fitting, a repair to an existing plate, an improvement to something that's been adequate but could be better. Mr. Kettrick is busier than usual. He takes on 2 extra appointment days and works through what would normally have been a half day on Saturdays. You learn in December that the prosthetics are only half the art. The other half is the consultation, the conversation in which someone describes what they want from their mouth, not what they need, which is the clinical assessment, but what they want, which is the aesthetic and emotional wish, and you translate that wish into achievable specifications. Mr. Kettrick is extraordinary at this. He listens with total attention. He asks questions that seem simple, but produce revealing answers. Questions about what the patient is most embarrassed about what they miss most, about what they hope to be able to do that they currently can't. And then he builds the answer to those specific questions. Not a generic denture set, but a response to a particular person's particular life. This is what he was teaching you, you realise, when he talked about the patients not just buying the teeth, but buying how they're made to feel. This is the actual skill. It's more sophisticated than you expected when you arrived in the city 8 months ago with your letter of introduction and your bundle of clothes and your idea of what a dental surgeon's apprentice was supposed to be. In January, you fit your first solo partial plate. It's for a woman named Mrs. Crane, a merchant's wife, pleasant and direct, who'd been coming to Mr. Kettrick for 2 years and who'd specifically requested for this final appointment, the adjustment fitting before delivery, to be seen by the apprentice. Mr. Kettrick has been training you, she'd said to you at the previous appointment. He says you're ready. I like to support young people getting started, and frankly, my dear, the fitting appointments are not exactly complex. She's right, and she's wrong. The fitting itself is technically not complex, in the sense that Mr. Kettrick has done 50 of these in front of you, and you understand the mechanics. But it's your first one alone, and Mrs. Crane's mouth, and her expectations, and the piece that represents 3 months of work. Mrs. Crane comes in at 9 o'clock. She sits in the chair with the comfort of someone who's been here before, who knows the room and its smells and its routines. "Good morning, Thomas," she says. "Good morning, Mrs. Crane." You lift the plate from its padded box. Let's see how this fits. 25 minutes. 3 small adjustments. A ridge on the inner surface of the ivory that was causing slight pressure on the gum. Solved with a scraper and 3 minutes of careful work. A minor occlusion issue on the right side, solved by the adjustment of one tooth's mounting angle by perhaps 2 degrees, a final polish, and then the plate in place, the bite tested. Mrs. Crane's expression as she works her jaw experimentally, feeling the plate, feeling what it does and what it doesn't do. She takes the hand mirror, the same moment you've seen before, the mirror coming up, the face reflected back. Mrs. Crane is 51 years old. She has the direct manner of a woman who doesn't waste time, and the efficient good humour of someone who's raised 5 children and run a household and still found time to read widely and have opinions about things. When she looks in the mirror, her expression does something that surprises you. It softens, not into gratitude exactly, more like recognition, like she's seeing someone she thought was gone. "That's me," she says almost to herself. "You stand very still." "That's me," she says again. "I haven't looked like that in," she considers, 7 years, maybe 8, since the last of the back teeth went. She lowers the mirror. "You did good work," she says. To you, directly, without the slight distance that some patients maintain toward a person who has their hands in their mouths for the better part of an hour. "You did good work, and I'm going to tell Mr. Kettrick so. You think about what the plate cost, what the teeth cost in every sense of cost. I'm glad, you say, and you mean it, and the meaning is complicated in a way you couldn't fully explain, but you mean it. Mrs. Crane goes home with a plate and a smile that's, her own words, herself. Mr. Kettrick, when you tell him about the appointment that afternoon, listens with his usual careful attention, and then nods once. Did you adjust the ridge on the left or the right? He asks. The right, sir. Inner surface, mid-plate. Pressure point on the gum near the second premolar. How much did you remove? Very little. Maybe 1/3 of a millimetre. He nods again. The occlusion issue. 2-degree adjustment on the upper lateral incisor mounting. Did it solve it fully? Bite testing said yes. She didn't report discomfort on closure. Good. He turns away. That's the work. That's the work. February, and something shifts in the city. Not in the city exactly. The city is always the same and always different. Its permanent tension between chaos and order, its grinding forward motion. What shifts is in your understanding of something. It happens at a dinner party. Not yours. Obviously not yours. You're a dental apprentice from Shropshire. Your dinner is Mrs. Cadwallader's stew twice a week and a pie from a street vendor on the other days. But you hear about it. Mr. Kettrick has patients who talk, who, in the particular intimacy of the dental chair, a person with their head tipped back and their mouth open, and the necessary surrender of dignity that requires, sometimes say things they might not say in other contexts, things about their lives, their households, their social observations. The patient who tells him is a woman whose name you've never learned, but whose teeth you've worked on twice. She's part of a certain social circle, the comfortable upper middle tier of London society. Not quite aristocracy, but not far from it. At a dinner party, she tells Mr. Kettrick, the conversation had come around to dentures. This happens apparently more often than you'd expect, because dentures are newly fashionable, and the number of people who have them is increasing now that the Waterloo supply has brought the price within reach of the prosperous. And someone at the dinner party had smiled, a wide, satisfied smile, and said, I've just had a new set made, Waterloo teeth, fresh from Belgium last year, the best teeth I've ever had. And someone else at the table had said, with a slight pause, do you ever think about who they belong to? And the person with the Waterloo teeth had said, and this is what the woman in Mr. Kettrick's chair tells him, and what Mr. Kettrick tells you. I suppose they belong to someone, but they belong to me now. Mr. Kettrick tells you this neutrally, without editorial comment. You sit with it for a while. They belong to someone, but they belong to me now. The clean logic of ownership, the logic of commerce applied to the hardest kind of material, the same logic, you suppose, that runs all the way down through the chain. Marsh buying the shipment from Belgium, the soldier who collected the teeth in the field buying them from the battlefield, the dead of Waterloo having had them bought from them at the price of their lives. What would you say? If you were at that dinner table, you think about the girl at Smithfield, about the man with the abscess, about the lines in the enamel of the 50-year-old who looked 65. You think about Lord Fenthorpe's face in the mirror, that moment of surprised gratitude, the armour going back on. You think about Mrs. Crane. That's me. They belong to someone. Yes, they did. You can't hold that and not hold it. Both things can be true, but both things can be true, and one of them can still be more important than the other one, or maybe not. Maybe they're genuinely equal. Maybe the woman at the dinner party is genuinely right. Possession, in 1817, is the relevant category, and what came before possession is background. Context, the raw material from which all possession comes if you go back far enough. You don't resolve it. You haven't resolved it by spring, and you suspect you won't, but you keep thinking about it. Spring. The city changes in spring, not dramatically. London is London, it doesn't transform, but the light changes, and the smell changes, and the energy changes, and even the particular quality of misery changes. Winter misery is cold and grey and ground down. Spring misery is restless and damp and somehow more active. The fogs lift. You wake on a morning in late March to actual sunlight through the window. Clean sunlight, or clean by London standards, which means you can see across the street without squinting. The air coming through the gap in the window sash smells of, it's almost hard to name it, it's been so long, of something green, something growing, some small defiant garden somewhere in the city producing the smell of living things. This affects you more than you expected. You stand at the window for a moment, just breathing. Mrs. Cadwallader, in the kitchen below, says something to someone. Her cat replies with the sound it makes when it wants feeding, the dull daily morning life of the city resuming. But the light is gold. You go to the surgery. Mr. Kettrick is already there, and he has tea on the small brazier and a patient letter open on the counter, and the particular focused morning energy that good surgeons always seem to have, the ability to step immediately from ordinary life into professional mode without apparent transition. Thomas, he says, I need you at St. Thomas's this afternoon. St. Thomas's, the hospital on the south side of London Bridge, the older one, the one Guy's was built to supplement, one of the oldest hospitals in England. A lecture, he continues. They're doing a series on prosthetics. Dr. Greenshaw has asked that I bring my current apprentice. After the morning patients, 3 extractions, 1 cleaning, a consultation with a solicitor named Mr. Bridger, who is 40, and is losing the battle against a jaw that seems constitutionally opposed to retaining teeth. You cross the river to St. Thomas's in the afternoon. Mr. Bridger was brisk and efficient during the consultation. At the end, after you'd laid out the options, he asked directly, the human teeth, they're from the battlefield? Some of our supplies from that source, you say. Some comes from other sources. I can't specify the individual provenance of each tooth. Is it the better quality, the Waterloo supply? You think about what to say, how to say the true thing without making it something it isn't. The battlefield supply tends to be from younger individuals, you say, which means the teeth are at a stage of development they tend to be very good quality, strong structure, good roots. Yes. Mr. Bridger nods, making a note. And the person it came from, they're dead. He says this not callously, but practically, the solicitor's preference for establishing facts. It's not causing them any ongoing harm. No, you say. Then it's just a resource, like anything else. Yes, you say, like anything else. He puts away his card. Good. He shakes your hand and goes. You stand in the surgery for a moment after, like anything else. And maybe that's the place you end up, after all the thinking, not the comfortable place. The comfortable place would be to land somewhere definite, to have a clear position. But maybe the actual place is neither yes nor no. Maybe the actual place is, like anything else, with full awareness of what anything else costs and who pays, and where the cost comes from. Full awareness. You keep working, you keep thinking, both things at once. The lecture at St. Thomas's is in a large room on the upper floor. a proper lecture theatre with banked seating on 3 sides of a central demonstration area. The kind of room where important things are shown and described and argued about by people who consider themselves the advance guard of medical science. Dr. Greenshaw begins with history. The history of dentures is, Dr. Greenshaw informs the room, considerably longer than most people assume. The Etruscans, the ancient Italian civilization that preceded Rome, were making dental prosthetics as early as 700 BC. Partial bridges, gold wire, using human and animal teeth. Remarkable craftsmanship for people working without the benefit of modern instruments. The Phoenicians, the Romans, medieval examples from across Europe. Ivory from elephant and walrus and hippopotamus, shaped and carved with the skill of craftsmen who never attended a lecture at St. Thomas's, but understood the shape of a human palate from long practice. Ivory's problems: it absorbs moisture, it stains, it warps over time, it smells, unpleasantly with use, of organic decay. It looks artificial. The colour is wrong. Patients who could afford human teeth prefer them overwhelmingly. And then, the supply question. He discusses it with the same clinical neutrality that Mr. Kettrick uses. This is where the teeth come from. These are the sources. This is the history of how the profession has addressed the supply challenge. Body snatchers and grave robbers. The poor selling their own teeth. The steady trickle from surgical procedures. And then, Waterloo. The supply from the Belgian campaign, he says, has fundamentally altered the economics of the upper end of the denture market. We are now seeing, for the first time in the history of the profession, a consistent and plentiful supply of high-quality young human teeth, available to practitioners at a price point that allows extension of the better quality prosthetics to a significantly wider patient population. He says it the way Mr. Kettrick says things, professionally, with the awareness that the professional frame is doing work, that it's making possible a level of objectivity that wouldn't otherwise be available. The question of ethics, Dr. Greenshaw says, and the room shifts slightly, a collective attention, is one that practitioners have addressed in various ways. My own view is that the dead have no use for their teeth, that the living do, that the question of consent, while theoretically significant, is practically moot in the case of combatants who have died in service. He's a good speaker. He makes it sound reasonable. It is reasonable in the terms of the argument. But you're thinking about something he said, about the economics being altered, about the price point allowing extension to a wider patient population, more people with access to human tooth dentures, presented as a good thing, which it is, better prosthetics for more people, better function, better lives, the democratization of the Waterloo grin, enabled by the supply from Belgium, enabled by the 50,000 dead. In the room around you, practitioners are taking notes, students are leaning forward. The machinery of professional knowledge is processing this information, incorporating it, making it part of the usable working understanding of how this field operates. You're 17 years old, and you have 43 extractions and 1 complete solo fitting to your name, and you are sitting in this room listening to the history of your profession, which is also the history of what you're becoming. The person in charge isn't the boy from Shropshire who flinched at crowds and got lost on every street. The person in charge is someone who has been inside this trade for nearly a year now, who has felt the root release through the forceps, who can read a set of teeth and estimate age and diet and health, who drilled the hole for Lord Fenthorpe's spare incisor and fitted Mrs. Crane's plate solo, and sat in Marsh's workroom and understood what he was looking at. After the lecture, in the corridor, Mr. Kettrick introduces you to several of his colleagues. A man from Edinburgh visiting London. A woman, which is unusual enough to note, who runs a small prosthetics practice in Bath. A young surgeon about 5 years older than you who has the alert, ambitious energy of someone in the early phase of building a career. They ask how long you've been with Mr. Kettrick. They ask about your training. They talk about the lecture, the supply question, the future of the trade. You stand in the corridor of St. Thomas's Hospital in the spring afternoon, and you talk about these things with people who are your professional world, and the conversation is interesting, and you're contributing to it, and you belong here in a way that you didn't quite 8 months ago. The boy from Shropshire who came to London with nothing but a letter of introduction is becoming something else. Something shaped by this city and its trade and its contradictions, its Waterloo grins and its free clinics, its street tooth drawers and its Harley Street practitioners, its Lord Fenthorpes and its girls at Smithfield. Both things at once. The year turns, the second year. You pass the anniversary of your arrival in London without meaning to. One day you simply realise over breakfast at Mrs. Cadwallader's table, with the cat trying to get into the milk jug, that you've been here a year. A year. The surgery is familiar in the way that only a year can make a space familiar. Not the conscious familiarity of having looked at something carefully, but the bone-deep familiarity of having been somewhere every working day through winter and summer and fog and heat. The particular quality of the light at different times of year, the way the fire needs to be managed on cold mornings versus mild ones, the sound of the Strand traffic at different hours. You're not the newest person at this work anymore. Mr. Kettrick has taken on a very junior assistant, a boy of 15, just arrived from Devon, who looks at London with the same wide-eyed alarm you had a year ago. And watching this boy learn the rhythms of the surgery is like watching a slightly younger version of yourself before the city worked on you. The boy's name is William, and he flinches from extractions and can't quite believe the smell of the surgery in the mornings, and asks questions that you remember asking, and gets lost twice a week on errands that should be simple. The ivory carver's at Cow Lane, you tell William for the third time. Off Smithfield. Turn right at the market gate, then right again. There's a tanner's on the corner, you'll smell it. William nods with the expression of a person trying to memorise a poem in a foreign language. The tanner's smell is how you know you've found the right corner, you add. What does a tanner smell like? William asks. You think about the actual smell of a tannery. The ammonia, the raw hide, the chemicals used to prepare the leather. Like something you've never smelled before, you say. You'll know it immediately. He nods again, less confidently. You'll be fine, you say. The city is findable. It just takes time. It just takes time. You send him on his way. And then you stand for a moment in the doorway of the surgery looking out at the Strand. Mid-morning, busy, as always. The usual mix. Coaches and carts and pedestrians, and the occasional sedan chair from someone who hasn't updated their preferences. Vendors. The coffee cart woman at the corner. 2 men arguing outside the draper's below, their voices too low to make out the subject. London, in the middle of the morning, in the middle of a march that's decided to try spring early this year. You've been here a year. You know which suppliers Mr. Kettrick trusts and which ones he doesn't. You know which patients will arrive early and which ones need a reminder sent the day before. You know the weight of a molar in your palm and can estimate the age of its former owner from the wear pattern on the biting surface. You know what the box at the street tooth drawers is for. You know what Marcia's workroom looks like at 2 p.m. in October with the candles lit and the woman sorting with practised hands. You know the lines in the enamel that record childhood hunger. You know the exact sound of a root releasing. All of this is part of you now. The year has put it there. You go back inside and you prepare the instruments for the morning's first patient, and the work continues. Summer. The summer of 1817 is not a good summer for England. The harvests are poor. There's been unusual weather throughout Europe, cold and wet when it should be warm and dry, and the effects ripple through the food supply with the slow inevitability of an economic consequence. Bread prices rise. The markets are thin. The poor, who live close enough to the margins that any fluctuation is consequential, are in difficulty. You notice this in the street. The queue at the free clinic when you go to assist Mr. Forbes is longer than it was in winter, which is backwards. Usually the free clinics are busier in the cold months when illness intensifies. But the queue is longer, the face is thinner, and in Marsh's workroom, when you make the monthly supply run, the supply is different. More street teeth, fewer Waterloo teeth, because the Waterloo supply is running down. The battlefield was picked over in the first year, intensively, thoroughly, the night scavengers moving systematically through the field, then returning, then the organised operations in the months that followed, the boatloads from Antwerp. But a battlefield, however large, is a finite thing. The supply was always going to peak and taper. It's tapering. Mrs. Walsh, you've learned her name, tells you this in the same matter-of-fact professional way she tells you everything. The Belgium lots have been getting smaller, she says. Marsh has 2 other sources in Europe, some from Prussian operations, some from the Spanish Peninsula residue, but nothing on the Waterloo scale, nothing will be on that scale. So the prices will already going up. You'll notice it in your invoices. She holds a tooth to the light, examines it. More street trade coming in, but quality is inconsistent, and there's demand we can't meet now. She sets the tooth down. People are going back to ivory more. The price differential was narrowing before. Now it's widening again. The price differential, the accessibility of human teeth to people who aren't aristocrats. The democratization of the Waterloo grin, closing. There'll be other sources, she says, with the equanimity of someone who's watched supply dynamics change before and expects them to change again. There always have been. It's just, she picks up another tooth. The timing isn't ideal. Not ideal. With the harvests poor and the bread prices up and the queue at the free clinic longer than it should be. The timing is not ideal. You carry the supply package back to the surgery. It's lighter than usual, fewer teeth, the tapering supply. The oilcloth wrapping crinkles in the warm July air. A year and a half in London. You have 109 extractions now, and 3 complete solo fittings, and the ability to assess a new patient's jaw in under 2 minutes, and identify what needs doing, and in what order. You have the calluses of the work on your right hand, the scraper's callus on the pad between the first and second finger, the instrument callus on the thumb, and you have all the knowledge you've been gathering, not just the dental knowledge, all of it. The woman with the 3 pence at Smithfield, Sergeant's teeth, Lord Fenthorpe's surprised gratitude, Mr. Forbes working through 15 patients in 4 hours for free because he chose to, the girl at the chair, her mother beside her, both things at once. You walk back to the surgery through the London summer, past the coffee cart, past the drapers below, up the stairs, the brass plate on the door, which you've polished 47 times now by your count. You polish it today too, because the work is the work and you are part of it now, and being part of it means keeping the plate bright. And here, in the long evenings of that second London summer, with the light staying late and the city noise drifting up through the window of the surgery, you start to understand something that took 1.5 years to understand. It's not about resolution. You came here with an idea that the world would be comprehensible, eventually, if you paid enough attention. That the parts would fit together in a way that made sense, that had a clear moral, that would tell you what to think and how to feel about the things you'd seen. The girl at Smithfield, the man on the battlefield, the woman in the drawing room with the Waterloo grin, the free clinic and the fashionable surgery, the lines of hunger in the enamel and the hippopotamus ivory base. None of it resolves cleanly. None of it becomes a simple lesson, a parable, a thing you can summarize to your mother in a letter from London. What it becomes, instead, is texture, the specific felt quality of having been in this particular world at this particular time, doing this particular work. You're 17.5 years old. You've pulled 109 teeth from 109 mouths. You've handled more teeth than that, sorted and cleaned and mounted teeth that came from places and people you'll never fully know. You know what the work costs and who pays and where the cost runs back to, and you can't unknow it. You can also not unhave the expressions on those faces. Lord Fenthorpe and Mrs. Crane and the man with the abscess and Mrs. Hartwell and her one tear running down to her jaw. That's me. Good work. That could be you. All of it true. All of it happening at once. You learn to live in the space of that. One evening in August, Mr. Kettrick comes into the workroom while you're working on a new partial plate. Your 4th solo, a commission for a banker's wife. And he stands at the bench and watches you work for a while without speaking. You're aware of him watching. You don't change what you're doing. You keep the drill steady, the angle consistent, the pressure even. I've been offered a partnership, he says eventually. You look up. A wider practice, Harley Street. 2 other practitioners joining with me. Greater premises, more staff, and more, he pauses, prominent clientele. Harley Street, the pinnacle. The street where the most fashionable medical practitioners in London have their premises, where the carriage trade goes, where the fees are extraordinary and the waiting lists are long. Will you take it? You ask. I'm considering it. He leans against the shelving. If I do, the practice here continues. Under different management. Under yours, eventually. Not now. You have some years yet. But the direction of the thing. You set down the drill. You're telling me the Strand premises would become mine. In some years. When you've completed your training and your journeymanship. When you're ready. He looks at the work on the bench. The partial plate. Precisely positioned on its stand. The mounting half done. You're ready sooner than most. You've been ready sooner than most for some time. You look at the plate, at the work you're doing. 1.5 years, 2 years, come the autumn. Will you take the Harley Street offer? You ask again. He's quiet for a moment. I believe I will, he says. This practice has been right for a long time. A good practice, good work, good patience. A slight pause. But there's a level above this, and I'd like to reach it, before I'm too old to care. The dreamer who snuck away to watch the merchants. You'll reach it, you say. He looks at you with an expression you can't quite read. Then he pushes off the shelving. Finish the plate, he says. She needs it by Friday. He goes. You pick up the drill, the work continues. And now it's late evening, and the summer light has finally gone out of the sky over London, and the stars are somewhere above the coal smoke if you know where to look. You're in the workroom. The candle has been burning for 3 hours. The partial plate is done. Finished an hour ago, polished and set in its padded box ready for Friday. You've been sitting here since then, not working, just here. The trays on the shelf, the sorted teeth, the jars on the back shelves, the brined supply. You've looked at this room dozens of times, hundreds of times. The smell of it is so familiar you don't smell it anymore. You'd notice if it changed, but its presence is simply part of the ambient reality of this space. You reach into the nearest tray and take out a tooth. An incisor. Upper, bright enamel, very good root. You hold it in the candlelight the way you always do. The translucency at the edge, the inner light. You don't know who this came from. You'll never know. But here's what you do know. You know what it feels like to hold a person's pain in your hands and work to relieve it. You know the moment when Mrs. Hartwell breathed out, all that held dread releasing, and the tear on her jaw that she didn't move to wipe. You know Lord Fenthorpe's face in the mirror, the armour going on and off, and Mrs. Crane saying "that's me," and the man with the abscess making the sound that was part pain and part relief. You know that the girl at Smithfield made the best choice available to her in the world as she found it. You know that the world shouldn't be arranged so that her choice is the best available one. You know both things. You set the tooth back in the tray. The candle gutters slightly. A movement of air from the window, from the London summer outside, from the city that is always moving, always breathing, always consuming and producing and trading and losing and finding and carrying on. 500,000 people out there, in their beds and their taverns and their gin shops and their grand houses and their lodging houses that are 3 families to a room, and their Suffolk courts and their Mayfair squares, all of them with mouths, all of them with teeth, or missing teeth, or wishing they had better ones, or paying someone to remove the ones that are past saving, all of them part of this same city, this same trade of bodies and services and pain and relief. You blow out the candle. In the dark, the sounds of the city come through the walls, the Strand at night, carriages, voices, the distant cry of a watchman. Tomorrow there will be patience. There will be wax and instruments and the particular intimacy of a person opening their mouth and trusting you to do something right in there. There will be Mrs. Walsh sorting teeth, and Mr. Kettrick reviewing his ledger, and William from Devon getting lost somewhere between here and Smithfield. There will be the work. Tonight there's just this, the dark workroom, the sounds of the city, the smell that you don't smell anymore because it's simply the air you breathe. You're tired in the good way, the way that means the day was full of real things. Your hands are clean, or as clean as London makes possible. You go upstairs. The attic room at Mrs. Cadwallader's is cold tonight, even in August. London cold. The cold that finds you regardless of season. The cold of old buildings and damp river air. You pull the blanket up and lie looking at the ceiling in the dark. Outside, the city. You close your eyes. The work is the work. The knowing is the knowing. The trade runs in the channels it runs in, and you are part of it now, not apart from it, not above it, but in it. Your hands in the work, your name eventually on the plate. Both things at once. The sound of the city softens. The ceiling is dark above you, and your body is tired and warm enough under the thin blanket, and the sounds from below are fading. The carriages less frequent now, the voices fewer, the city settling into whatever passes for quiet in a place that never fully stops. Tomorrow there will be patients who need help and work that needs doing, and a world that is neither as simple as you hoped, nor as hopeless as it sometimes seems. Tonight, There is just this darkness, and this tiredness, and the sound of London breathing all around you. You've earned the rest. It's all right to take it. The sounds grow softer still. The ceiling disappears. The darkness is warm, or warm enough. There is only this, the breathing, the quiet, the long, slow, downward drift of mind letting go. The city is still out there. It will be there in the morning, in all its contradictions, all its difficulty, all its strange demanding life. But right now it's only dark, only quiet, only this. Let the sounds go, let the day go, let everything you held today, the knowledge, the weight, the faces, the teeth in their trays, let it rest. You don't have to figure it out tonight. You don't have to carry it right now. There is just the darkness and the warmth and the slow, certain fact of being alive in this city on this night. And that is enough. That is all you need. Let sleep take you the way it took every one of them. The girl at the fair, the lord in his carriage, the soldier in the field on the last day of June in 1815 who never knew that one morning a year and a half later, a boy from Shropshire would hold his tooth in a candlelit room in London and think about what it means to hold something that used to be part of someone. Let it all go soft. Let it all go still. Let your breathing slow. Let your hands unclench. 300 years from now, someone will read about this trade in a history book, and they'll shudder, and they'll think, how could they? And the answer is the same answer it always is, the same way people do everything. By needing something and having something, and the world arranging itself between need and having in the particular shape that this world arranges itself in, which is never clean, never simple, never resolving into the lesson you hope to find. Just life, just people, just this. The church bells are ringing somewhere. You're too tired to count them. Let them ring. Let the sound come and go. Let it fade. Good night.